Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most intense, complicated, and deeply human conflicts of the modern era. The fight against the Taliban inside Afghanistan. This story isn't just about soldiers and weapons, but about a nation struggling to define its future. People caught between fear and hope, and the relentless demands of a war that shaped an entire generation. In this video, we'll explore the realities faced by those on the ground, the strategic challenges, the emotional weight of combat, and what this long and difficult battle meant for Afghanistan and the world. The goal is to give you a clear, honest, and thoughtful perspective on what happened, why it unfolded the way it did, and what lessons can be drawn from one of the most studied conflicts of the 21st century. The conflict in Afghanistan didn't begin suddenly, nor did it follow a straightforward path. It emerged from decades of political upheaval, foreign intervention, ideological clashes, economic hardship, and tribal dynamics that have shaped Afghanistan's identity. Understanding the fight against the Taliban requires understanding the environment that allowed their movement to grow. The Taliban emerged in the mid-1990s as a force promising stability after years of civil war. For many Afghans exhausted by chaos, the idea of order, however strict, was appealing. But while the Taliban brought a type of centralized control, it came with severe restrictions on freedom, education, and daily life, especially for women and minorities. When international intervention began in 2001, the fight wasn't simply about removing a regime. It became a long-term effort to rebuild a state where countless internal and external pressures were constantly pulling in different directions. Inside Afghanistan, the experience of soldiers, local forces, and civilians was shaped by the geography itself. Mountains, valleys, deserts, and isolated villages created an environment where movement was difficult and visibility was limited. For troops moving through these regions, every ridgeline held uncertainty. The landscape shaped strategy, slowed operations, and gave insurgent forces natural advantages. Many of the people fighting described the terrain as both beautiful and unforgiving, stunning to look at yet filled with danger. It wasn't unusual for patrols to move cautiously through areas where threats were invisible until the last moment. In such conditions, tension stayed high, and decisions had to be made quickly, sometimes in seconds, because hesitation could mean disaster. For the soldiers and Afghan forces engaged in daily operations, the challenges extended far beyond physical danger. They had to navigate the cultural and social complexities of Afghanistan's rural communities. Building trust was essential, but trust took time. Many villagers had lived through decades of shifting authority. Today it might be the Afghan government, tomorrow the Taliban, next week an entirely different group. To survive, many communities chose the safest path, which often meant staying quiet, cooperating with whoever had the most influence at that moment, or giving minimal information to avoid retaliation. This meant that international and Afghan forces had to work patiently, learning which signals mattered, which promises were meaningful, and which alliances could truly be counted on. One of the most powerful aspects of the conflict was the relationship between soldiers and Afghan civilians. Many troops spoke about the emotional contrast they experienced daily. One moment, they were sharing tea with a village elder or watching children play in dusty streets. The next moment, they were preparing for an operation or reacting to an attack. Those human interactions shaped their understanding of the conflict more than any training manual could. It reminded them that behind every headline and every political debate were real people trying to survive, raise families, and hold on to whatever stability they could. Inside the fighting itself, split-second decisions defined outcomes. The battle against the Taliban was unpredictable, with long stretches of silence followed by sudden bursts of intensity. Many operations involved moving through narrow paths, abandoned compounds, or remote valleys where visibility was limited. Troops described the constant mental pressure of staying aware, reading the environment, and recognizing subtle signs that something was wrong. A door slightly ajar, a road unusually empty, or a new pile of rocks along a path could signal danger. These small details became essential for survival. Improvised explosive devices or wides were one of the greatest threats. Placed under dirt, hidden in walls, or disguised as everyday objects, they created constant fear. Every step could be the one that changed everything. Explosive ordnance teams worked tirelessly to locate and neutralize devices, but the danger never disappeared. The emotional strain of knowing that the ground itself could be lethal created a tension that followed soldiers everywhere. Many described the sound of gravel under their boots as something they never forgot. Throughout the conflict, the Afghan National Army and police forces played a central role. Their success was vital to securing long-term stability, but building a professional, well-trained force in a country recovering from decades of war was a monumental challenge. Many Afghan soldiers came from rural backgrounds with little formal training. Others joined to support their families in a country where economic options were limited. Training brought people together from different tribes, languages, and regions, and forging unity wasn't easy. Yet many Afghan soldiers showed exceptional resilience, fighting bravely in conditions that demanded courage and determination. Their experiences often mirrored those of international forces, shaped by the same dangers and losses. The emotional toll on everyone involved in the conflict was immense. Soldiers carried the weight of responsibility, fear, and constant uncertainty. Civilians lived with the risk of being caught between opposing sides. Afghan interpreters, who played a crucial role in bridging communication gaps, faced threats not just during the war but long after it. Many lived knowing that the Taliban viewed them as traitors. This reality created an emotional burden few outside the conflict can fully understand. As the years passed, strategies evolved and priorities shifted. Early objectives focused on removing Taliban control. Later efforts centered around counterinsurgency, which required protecting local communities, supporting Afghan governance, and weakening the Taliban's influence. Counterinsurgency demanded more than military operations. It required building schools, improving roads, supporting local authorities, and encouraging community-led solutions. It was a long-term investment, one that required patience and coordination. But the complicated political reality inside Afghanistan meant progress was slow, fragile, and easily reversed. One of the most difficult aspects of the conflict was identifying who truly held power in different regions. Afghanistan's local politics were shaped by family ties, tribal loyalties, historical rivalries, and resource scarcity. In some areas, the Taliban gained influence not just through force but through negotiations, intimidation, and promises. For a villager deciding whom to support, the choice wasn't ideological. It was survival. Supporting the wrong side could bring violence to their doorstep. This created an environment where loyalties shifted, sometimes daily, making mission planning extremely difficult. The human stories from Afghanistan remain the heart of the conflict. Many soldiers spoke about friendships formed under pressure, bonds that lasted long after deployments ended. Many Afghans remembered small moments of kindness, medical aid, shared meals, help with farming equipment. That made a lasting impact. These are the stories that rarely appear in headlines, but reveal the deeper layers of a war that was both tragic and deeply personal. As the years went on and withdrawal discussions began, the nature of operations changed. Fewer large-scale missions were conducted, and focus shifted to supporting Afghan forces. The hope was to leave behind a stable and self-reliant military, but the political situation, both within Afghanistan and internationally, made this transition complicated. When foreign forces eventually withdrew, the speed at which the Taliban regained control shocked the world. It highlighted how fragile the progress had been, and how deeply the conflict had shaped Afghanistan's political landscape. Looking back, the battle inside Afghanistan raises countless questions about strategy, commitment, culture, and the limits of military power. But it also reminds us of the courage displayed by those who served, those who lived through the conflict, and those who tried to build a better future despite overwhelming challenges. The story isn't just about war. It's about resilience, sacrifice, and the complexity of a nation trying to rebuild in the shadow of trauma. Today, Afghanistan continues to face uncertainty. The people who lived through the conflict carry memories and scars that will last a lifetime. Understanding their experiences helps us recognize the human cost of war and the importance of long-term stability, diplomacy, and empathy in international decision-making. The purpose of examining these stories isn't to glorify conflict but to learn from it, to understand the real impact on human lives, and to encourage thoughtful discussion about global responsibility. The story of fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan is one of the most significant chapters in recent history. It reminds us that war is never simple. It reveals the limits of technology, the strength of human endurance, and the necessity of understanding cultural and political realities before attempting to shape them. For the soldiers who fought, the civilians who endured, and the families who waited at home, it is a story filled with loss, courage, confusion, and hope. Their experiences deserve to be remembered honestly, without simplifying the pain or ignoring the humanity of those involved. As we reflect on the conflict, it becomes clear that Afghanistan's story isn't over. The world continues to watch, to debate, and to learn from the past. And for many who were part of the battle, the memories remain vivid moments of fear, acts of bravery, friendships forged, and lessons learned. These experiences form the real story behind the headlines, a story that continues to shape global understanding of conflict, strategy, and human resilience. Thank you for taking the time to explore this complex and important topic. If you gained value from this explanation and want more deep-dive content like this, make sure to stay tuned for future videos.